I will turn my volume up. I will turn y'all's volume pretty close to up. And... Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and welcome back to our Around the Hearth. We actually have... Kane is here. See, I'll show you. He's right there. See? Ta-da! Surprise, ladies. The hunk of man meat is back.
I thought he didn't like us anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly meat. I don't know about hunky.
But before we get into our conversion, not a conversion actually, more of a discussion about tropes and things like that, as you can tell from the title, we have announcements that we need to do and disclaimers. So, disclaimer, this is an adult podcast that sometimes features adults, that sometimes use adult language. You have been warned. The Inn of Planar Crossroads still has its Patreon going on and its Subscribe Star going on. So if you want to support us on either one of those, you can. You have options. All of those tiers that we have on there are going to be updated soon, so you can keep an eye on those. And we'll be offering some 3D printing services to those that are our patrons, because we want to add some value to our Subscribe Stars and patrons, our supporters. Let me see. Our 500 one shot is going to go. The video about it is going to go live fairly soon. We've got it almost ironed out. The next one will be at 1,000. So when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we will do another one-shot giveaway as well as probably some physical items. So there you go. That's everything I have, I think. Oh, remember that all the content you see on the Inn of Planar Crossroads is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. I need to do that at the front of videos more often, because we already do it at the end with Addie's sign out.
Thank you.
So, you guys got any announcements before we dive in?
No.
Okay.
This is also the channel I am predominantly on. I can't say that I do.
Okie dokie. So, this time we're going to be doing, and we'll have websites up for you people to look at. We're going to be doing not necessarily an actual conversion, more of a trope discussion on building a party successfully, or at least thematically appropriately, around tropes you find in fantasy or other media, so that you can play up those tropes and have fun with them. So, at least that's my understanding. Is that right, Kane? It was his suggestion.
Yeah, basically, it's that, and just, like, sort of focused around the idea that just because something is cliched doesn't mean it's boring, and that, like, picking a theme and sticking to it can add a lot to both your enjoyment of the character and the overall cohesiveness of how that character plays.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely agree with that. So, what we're going to do is we've got 5 roles. Basically, we didn't break it up into classes necessarily. We're breaking it up into roles in a party, because you always have these roles in a party. If you have 5-man party, you usually have these roles. You have the tank, whether that's a meat shield or somebody who negates damage or something like that. You have the tank. You have the DPS, usually physical, but sometimes it can be magical. You have the rogue, the support, who is kind of like the one who buffs the party and stuff like that. And then you have the healer as well. And then there's that 5th one that is sometimes optional, which is called the controller. So, tank, DPS, support, healer, and then an optional controller is what I'm kind of getting from our assessment. Is that correct?
I would have said the support was the optional one, but yes, basically.
That is true. So, what one are we doing? We're going to roll a 20-sided die and see where it goes. D20. Right there.
D20. Okay. Have them split up front to back.
Roll.
That is 9. So, 9 to 12. That is the mage or the control.
Okay.
So,
cool beans.
The control character in our 5-man band.
No, it's not the band one. It's not the band one. You can't use that one.
5-man band is in a cohesive collection of peoples.
Right? All right. So I will mark that on my thing, and we can begin. So, since this was Kane's suggestion, we'll go ahead and let him start up. So, the controller, what would you... we can start with Pathfinder, since that's what Kane knows best. It's his suggestion. And then we'll also do a controller in Open Legend, which is Levi and mine's favorite. I think it's Levi's favorite.
Look, y'all keep talking about how awesome it is, but I haven't gotten the chance to play it yet, so I can't speak on this matter.
You get in the one shot.
It's a different kind of fun. I don't know about favorite. They both have good places in my heart.
Okay, Kane, what you got?
Okay. So when I think of the archetypal control mage or control caster, it is magic that I first come to. I don't think of a non-magical way of controlling the battlefield, short of like if we were playing some sort of science fiction game and I could supplement sufficiently advanced technology for magic, as they are indistinguishable.
Yeah, eventually.
I would probably pull on tropes like I mentioned before, the mage who is useless without magic, and in Pathfinder, I mean, people can make that argument that any tier 1 caster is useless without magic, but I don't mean like doesn't contribute in combat without magic. I mean like can't do their hair or make breakfast without magic. Like
you mean like the wizard who has everything done by magic?
Yeah, like all of their gear is enchanted. When they make dinner, it's a set of enchanted cookware does all of it for them because they don't know how to start a fire without using spark cantrip. They possess no practical non-magical skills.
Yeah.
And if they're ever in a situation where they can't rely on magic, or they're in a situation where they don't want to use magic because it's for whatever reason they don't agree with using magic in that scenario, they're just sort of at a loss. One instance I might consider it is if you were going to do like a romance subplot or something.
Oh god.
Your mage has no practical social skills, and he could theoretically engage in this romance subplot with charm spells, but at that point you're not really, that's just creepy and weird. And there's the question of consent comes in, and it's a whole thing, and you probably just shouldn't do it. So the character ends up in a situation where they're just incredibly awkward because they won't rely on magic to make their way through this situation, this scenario.
Fair enough. I also see that super fragile controller is kind of what we're going for. Very much something that you see with the Raceland and Casa, his brother, Raceland and Caramon from the Dragonlance novels.
From Dragonlance, yes.
Raceland is actually, if you look up the archetypal wizard from that series, usually around 2E, Raceland is prominently featured in a lot of art because he was that archetypal mage. Like that mage that if he cast a spell, it was physically taxing on him to do anything. But he was super powerful if he could get when he used his magic. But everything outside of magic was bad for him, which is why he needed his brother Caramon. Because Caramon was the opposite. He had no brains, really, but he had a heart and he had his strength. That's what Caramon was. So they were the two min-maxed instances of the spectrum. And for those of you that like it, playing into a trope is a great way to play a min-maxed character while still having plenty of RP available to you.
Yeah. It definitely adds you like a lot of... I think the reason I put them together is when I and a friend of mine were putting them together, we have those two sort of characters that exist together. The mage who's useless without magic, and the big dumb fighter who is just very oblivious. And when you put them together, sometimes you can end up with a bunch of either very frustrating scenes or a bunch of really cute scenes where one of them is trying to be emotional or emotionally vulnerable with the other. Oh, and there goes Adam. Emotionally vulnerable with the other, and it sort of devolves into just incredibly awkward dialogue because one of them is stupid and the other one doesn't know how to convey themselves emotionally.
Very, very true.
Yeah, that has a lot of story potential.
All right. So that's kind of the story stuff. That's the thing that you would go for in your brain pan. So looking at tropes, that would be Raceland. That would be... What would be another mage that you would see in popular media that was a controller in that sense? Because controller can be Charm Wizard or it can be a battlefield controller. Either way, you can use either one.
Yeah, and I think that also plays into it. I don't know if they converted the tropes straight over into TV tropes from SpongeBob, but the paper skin and glass bones.
Oh yeah,
is just incredibly fragile. What specifically were we talking about?
What are some characters that they can draw from to see those tropes? So
other characters that are... Well, I don't know. It just seems like such a generic, like... This should be an easier question to answer.
Well, I think what has happened, at least in popular media nowadays, is you don't see a lot of that. You see a lot more balanced characters.
But those characters, I would argue that those characters are balanced. They're not... people, I think nowadays in popular media, it's becoming less about the character being balanced and more about the character can do a little bit of everything.
Right. Well, that's technically balanced. What we come to... Well-rounded is balanced. When you talk about balance in games like tabletop games or any game, balance is talked about as being a good thing. Imbalance is actually more fun most of the time, because imbalance on both the player and the GM side allows for a lot more dramatic stakes, which is why tropes like the super fragile wizard can be really fun if you've got a GM working with you or something like that about, hey, he's the super fragile mage. Now, we're trying to get back onto the examples. So you've got Raceland. You've got other mages that you see are usually pretty close. They've usually got a little bit of something to help them out in situations, instead of relying on another character, which actually allows for more role play, but doesn't necessarily allow for more mechanical safety. So I would probably go. I don't actually get to watch a lot of fantasy nowadays. But if you remember the old Conan movies, the sorcerer, he was played by Mako. He was very much a paper thin mage, in the sense that he could defend himself, but only with magic.
I suppose it really does occur most frequently in like a traditional fantasy, because even actually when I think of like more recent movies, like my first thought was Lord of the Rings. Oh wait, no, most of those wizards are also technically demigods.
Yeah, those wizards are OP.
But I mean, you see it pretty universally with tabletop role-playing games, at least class-based ones. So like all of Dungeons and Dragons, all of Pathfinder, your tissue paper people. Like you get shredded if you end up in a dangerous scenario. And like the same thing is reflected in a lot of RPG video games. I'm struggling to find an example now, which is very frustrating, but it's reflected in games almost universally. You do magic, you don't have many hit points, you're very fragile. You rely very, very heavily on magic to do
everything.
Well, and if you're going for something from a more modern setting, this would be the nerd who's really good at tech, but can't fight to save his life. Like if you were in a Shadowrun game or another game that was heavy tech based, you could use that as an example of this controller who's able to manipulate the battlefield, or even the emotions or the
Home
information.
Alone it.
You can Home Alone it. Yeah, Home Alone. Kevin from Home Alone. He's the controller mage. And he totally dominates the rogues. They don't make their saves.
Okay, but they're not very good rogues.
No, they're like the brawler rogues or whatever they are.
They're kind of garbo.
They're the thug rogues. There we go. But that might be a modern setting type thing.
Yeah. A genius little kid is actually really nicely fits into this trope, generally speaking. Because they haven't they've not had enough time to learn any of the other skills.
Except for this one thing that they think about all the time.
Or because they think about it all the time, now they see no need for the other skills, because children, if not taught morals and left to their own fleshly nature, are very dangerous when it comes to moral decisions.
Lord of Flies.
The id takes hold, and then all of a sudden we have a pig head on his stick.
All right. So those are kind of the ideas. What would you guys say would be a good class in Pathfinder? We don't necessarily have to go into specifics or archetypes unless you know one right off the bat. But what are some classes that you would see as this really good either magic controller, or you could branch into non-magic controllers too? But most of the time in like Pathfinder, you're going to see magic as being the controller.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, for starters, you obviously have the wizard.
Sorcerer, wizard, the arcane casters tend to have a lot of... Okay, witches are like the magical like...
Trump card.
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, so really any of like your tier 1 arcane casters, any of your full caster arcane casters. If you wanted something that didn't use magic, I suppose you could do something like the Trapper Ranger, which does some battlefield control through mundane or only like weakly magical means.
And then you can actually play Kevin from Home Alone.
Yeah. I think
the Trapper Ranger would literally be Kevin from Home Alone.
Another good one could probably be an alchemist, specifically a more combat-focused alchemist, like, for example, the Grenadier.
And then you get a tumor familiar for that to do your other handiwork.
I think the alchemist might actually have a trapper
archetype.
I
would also throw out there that you can do, if you want to do something more holy, there are spells for divine casters that really focus in on control as well. But if you want to do the mind control thing, which can get iffy if you get into heavy will saves, then having that gnome illusionist can be pretty potent.
Yeah. So what kind of... Can you guys think of any other traps you would use to play a controller? Any other... What did I say? Can you think of any other classes you would use to play a controller?
Well, I mean, you could certainly play a divine controller, but the main problem is they have too many other things going for them, generally. They have better HP, better base attack bonus, and better armor proficiencies most of the time.
Yeah. If you're going for that paper-thin mage, yeah. Clerics are pretty good. So.
Yeah.
Clerics and their variants are usually pretty good.
Of being weak and not having a lot of hit points, kobolds have a racial archetype called Snare Setter.
That's right.
Which is all about setting up traps.
And if you give a kobold time in a small space, they will wreck a high-level party.
And they also learn ranger traps and get to add their intelligence modifiers in place of wisdom for DCs and stuff. They like playing. If you wanted to go the non-magical route, and frankly, even if you wanted to go the magical route, playing a trapsmith or some sort of controller class as a kobold, I think would be very you would play really heavily into the theme or the trope, because that's what kobolds do. They're trapsmiths. They pick an area and they fortify it to control it as heavily as possible.
Mm-hmm. And it also fits with relying on other characters, because then you have to rely on the other characters to protect you after you've set the traps, because until then, you're pretty squishy, especially as a kobold.
Yeah, I think that the controller caster also plays into the trope of like the tactician, or the character who's always pushing his glasses up his nose into a lens flare, who's got everything planned out 7 steps ahead.
Very log horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, very log horizon.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. I like that. I didn't get to finish season 2, but I like that first season.
Yeah. You don't have to buy guild space, because you just buy the entire hall and tell everyone you'll lock them out if they don't cooperate.
Yeah, you lock them out of their guild bank. Oh man.
Yeah, it's like you obey the laws or you don't get access to your money. That's such a good move.
Yeah.
But yeah, something like that. Like, take control beyond just casting wall spells and creating pits and setting snares. Like, you would funnel more directly into playing a character whose shtick is that they outsmart their enemy. They lay traps and manipulate not only the battlefield, but like the social battlefield. They play mind games to manipulate people into doing things instead of just
Mm-hmm. And if you want to, again, with that non-magical stuff, the rogue focusing on dirty tricks can be very helpful in that sense. If that's what they do, they focus on dirty tricks or debuffing, basically. That could technically be a control wizard, a controller of the battlefield. So we would say kobold, trap setter. That's what we think. That'd be a good controller.
For a non-magical, I would go for like a kobold trapsmith, and then for magical, I would some sort of wizard, probably
maybe elven, to also have that penalty to con.
Probably an elf, because they take the penalty to con, and also just because elves are such a in fantasy, traditional or otherwise, elves are such a stereotypical wizard choice.
Unless you're in Dark Sun, then they're cannibals that'll eat you.
Yeah, then they're terrifying.
See, but just because you're a cannibal doesn't mean you can't be a wizard.
But they're terrifying cannibal mongrels, whether or not they can do magic.
No one.
Fair enough.
They don't want to do magic. No one wants to do magic in Dark Sun, though.
They just want to eat people.
Yeah. They just come down from the hills because they got eyes. All right. So, you can never go wrong as far as for Pathfinder. You can never go wrong with human. Gnome is good if you want illusion. Elf is good if you want to go into that paper thin one, or any of them that have that negative to con. You can even still stick with a kobold and go with a sorcerer that focuses on that type of thing, because they get some nice things for sorcerer. But you're going to run into the problem of you need the stats if you're a mage of any kind, and you don't always get it. So, yeah, I think that's pretty good. Sylphs are actually pretty good for momentum if you're wanting to have a class based around the movement of your fellows, teleporting and so on, similar to what Brassett does.
Nothing personnel, kid.
Nah, he's like, I am going to be invisible, I'm going to be gone. Poof.
Yeah. So, it seems like the breakdown here, so far as our three most archetypal choices are the kobold trapper, the gnome illusionist, or the elven wizard.
Wizard catch-all.
Right. Of walls.
The elven full caster.
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. And that's really as specific as you actually need to go. You don't... Race and class are all you really need to define, because once you get past that, you're going into what your specific wizard is going to be like, or your specific controller is going to be like. So, if you want to leave ideas of your own in the comments below, you can. But let's switch systems real quick so that we can try and fit this in to a moderately timed video. We're getting close to the 30-minute mark, but Open Legend doesn't take nearly as long as Pathfinder does.
Okay.
So,
because I can do this real quick.
Yeah, we do this real quick. So, what are your ideas, Levi, for controller wizard? We're looking at Banes, or what are we looking at?
If we want to go the absolute entire reliance on magic that was initially brought up, don't put any points into anything that isn't an extraordinary.
Yeah.
You will be the most defenseless, easiest to kill thing in the world, but you will have all of the magic possible. In that case, also take boon, like, your feat points related to that, maybe like boon focus, so that way you can fly instead of walking places.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maybe attack specialization if you're taking like energy or entropy, so that way you can have that terrifying... Ooh, like, attack specialization also applies for making Bane stick, so you could have like Bane focus, immobile, and a couple attack specializations to make sure that you could just sit down a big area where you smash their feet and then hold them to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from a efficiency point of view, then going into movement would probably be one of the stat you want to have a 5 in, for sure, at level 1. Because that means you can both fly and you can control how fast others move, which makes you the controller of the battlefield type of thing. Because you can do slow or haste, and so on and so forth. And you can flavor that with Open Legend however you want. Maybe you're a time mage, or maybe you just hold them back with vines if you want to go with a druid type setup, or theme it that way, and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a ton of options. If you want to have it non-magical, you could put almost all of it into learning or logic to be that kind of trapsmith. Take the craft mundane item, focus it around traps.
Yeah. And you could go with probably logic as your 5, you would think, and then learning as a secondary.
Maybe like a 3.
Yeah.
Something like that could work pretty well. For our Home Alone build.
For Kevin.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I'm sure someone has made Kevin from Home Alone as a...
It's very fair.
I'm pretty sure
as well, he deserves it.
That is also fair. So yeah, I would focus, if we were going magic, we think movement, and then sprinkle in others. Probably alteration would be a good one to sprinkle in, because then you can do polymorph onto somebody, and actually be the mage from Warcraft that turns people into a sheep.
Yeah.
So that would be fun. If you're talking more about preventative stuff, movement and prescience are actually a good idea, because you can get precog type stuff with prescience.
Get that very 10 moves ahead character vibe. As far as banes that you would want to go with, you can really go with almost any bane you want to, depending on where your stats are. But with that movement, if you invest heavily into movement, then you can go with haste and slow. If you go heavily into prescience instead, you can get pre-information. But there's a lot of things you can use. Like entropy would actually be a good one for somebody. Alteration and entropy would be good for somebody wanting to go for a more, I'm going to weaken the enemies instead of buffing the allies, which is another role's kind of job. Yeah.
I tend to find that my healer and my controller tend to be kind of the same person, though, for a lot of the time.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's also the way I tend to play it, because in my early development about learning Pathfinder, I was taught very early on that, like, focusing on healing is not necessarily a good way to go, because it's just, you want to stop your enemies from dealing damage to your opponent or to your allies before. Yeah, preemptive healing in a sense, and that's kind of where the control comes in. In that case, the controller is focused more so on buffing and debuffing and healing than it is, and buffing and debuffing and then healing than it is like mass illusions or things of that nature.
Right, and I think we'll get into that version of stuff into other tropes.
Right, like the healer and the support often overlap in a lot of parties, especially when you have a 4-man party instead of a 5 like we're going with here. If you've got a 4-person party, the support and the healer often overlap because you don't have that breathing space to really define the different ones. And if you've only got a 3-man party, then your magic user is running all 3 of these different roles of controller, buffer, and healer sometimes.
The fewer people you have in your party, the more like double, triple duty you have to pull.
So there's that. Another point for entropy is if you want to do fear effects, that's going to be entropy or creation, or as far as the supernaturals, or not supernaturals, the extraordinaries. Yeah, extraordinary attributes. But those are some that you can do. Oh, movement also gives you the ability to move people around the battlefield with force move. So
that's
you can
true.
definitely
you can
do
teleport allies.
It's really nice. Movement is a very good extraordinary, in my opinion.
Somebody who's played
into it.
So
as somebody who's played a lot of Divinity Original Sin 2,
all right.
Don't mess around with teleportation, masters.
Fire, drop them on top of explosives.
Drop them on top of other people.
Drop people on top of them.
All right. And when it comes to Open Legends, that's really all you need to know is where to focus your points, because at level 1 you don't have a lot of choices to make. Now, you may want some feats. So depending on what you're wanting to do, if you're going polymorph, definitely go alteration, and definitely specialize in that. Get your
Like Bane Focus would be a good... Like Bane Focus and Persistent Bane would both be pretty good ones.
Mm-hmm. Let me
get advantage to invoke it in the first place, and then give them disadvantage to resist it.
And Bane Focus is only a 3. Only a 3-point investment.
You could get both of those at level 1.
So there you go. You could literally be the polymorpher and then put a little bit in energy so you could nuke them like on WoW. Because a lot of the times, for some reason, they have the Fire Mage as the one that's doing the polymorphing, when it would probably be the Arcane Mage spec. But
yeah. Although at the same time, that's a kind of fun thing. Nuke their resistance to your attack, and then...
Mm-hmm. So, comboing Creation and Entropy for a Fire Mage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could work.
I brought you into this world, I could take you out.
Yeah. All right. So, that's pretty good. Bane focusing. There's... For those that want to go the physical route, there's something called Battlefield Punisher, but it's mainly for someone who is really heavily investing in controlling it with physical attacks. The example they give is like a paladin, a stalwart paladin who knocks a foe prone, or a ninja who blinds somebody, or a telekinetic psychic who hurls somebody away or something. So it depends on which way you want to go, but do remember, when you're playing Open Legend, as long as you can narratively justify it with your ability and it fits into it, you can do it. So the class spread, there's no class spread to worry about. Just focus on your role. So if you're playing the trope, focus on the hyper powerful mage or the trapper role. All right. We are at about, we're just over almost to 40 minutes. So, any last remarks about this trope? I guess we'll call this Trope Talks or something like that.
Trope Talks. Trope Trove.
Trope Trove. That sounds fun. There we go. Trope. I'm writing that down. So that's where we got it, people. That's how we come up with stuff. It just comes, just
alliterate something. I think probably the most important thing to remember when doing something like this, when putting a character like this together, is to remember what your themes are and to stick to them. Because if you can hold your guns, and it's something you enjoy. I mean, if you build a character that you don't enjoy playing, that's figure it out. Change the character if you have to make it something you enjoy. But if you've picked tropes that you enjoy portraying and you're playing a character that you like, if you just stick to those tropes, I think you'll find that you're playing a character you enjoy more.
Mm-hmm. That it's definitely
it'll be easier to play that character too.
It is
That's
definitely
part of the reason why I'm having trouble with Wilton. He's not the type of character. I don't know.
And there's definitely something to be said for trying to intentionally branch out of your usual.
Yeah. I think it's been interesting for me because it's comparing my character in the FFD20 game, Aloran, who I love, which is my branch out from a normally playing like the wizard geeky sort of character of the Divine Cleric to a hard, like, just gish, sort of like maverick sort of loner, which is what I kind of tried to do with Wilton, but I did it too late, and I don't exactly like how I did it with him. It's interesting in that regard.
Yeah, he's like your first draft, so it's all right. First drafts are meant to be a little rough.
You can also, I've also been guilty of starting really strong with the theme and then not being able to stick with it. That happened with Magpie a little. I started very, very strong with the whole...
Magpie is amazing!
Yeah, with the whole bird thing, and it became less prevalent as time went on. It never fully disappeared, and it came back in strength towards the end, but there was definitely a period where I was like, I don't feel like being a bird today.
That is a fair thing to feel.
That is fair.
I don't want to be a bird today. I want to be a person today. God.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of the ones I've liked playing a lot. Role playing is a tiefling healer, strictly healer. No, he does not damage anybody. He'll summon somebody else, but he himself has made a vow not to damage anybody himself. Directly damage anybody himself in combat, or engage in that, or initiate it. So that was fun playing that pacifist. He never got to shine, not because I got tired of him, but more because it was harder to play that with people that didn't want to play that way. They didn't want to RP that way. And that's something that comes in. If your mindset about the game is that you're going to optimize to succeed, period, and you're not going to optimize to your character's trope, because every character technically would have a trope. It has an idea, a theme. Every character would have a theme. There we go. That's a better way to say it. So stick with your theme, because it's your theme. That's what you wanted to play. Play what you wanted to play. Don't feel like you have to compete with other people's DPS or this or that, because your end game is different than their end game. Your goal of enjoyment is going to be your ability to enjoy it. But I think we've said enough, and I think we've gotten off topic here at the end. We're going more into tropes.
But it's still been good.
It's good. So we thank you for coming by, everybody. We hope you enjoyed. And we hope that you come back next time for our Trope Talk, which will be a different, our Trope Trove, which will be different, because we're going to roll we're going to roll a D4 probably next time, because we only have 4 slots. But we'll do that next time. Have a great day. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.